Greetings, greetings, family. We are live. And as you can see, we have our leader, Mbandaka, in the house. And wow, family. As you know, I am just always in awe of the magnitude and the wealth and the breadth and the depth of the knowledge that our brother leader Mbandaka has, and that he's taken the time out to share with us. We are so grateful. Brother leader Mbandaka, just want to welcome you again. Leader Mbandaka is from the Al-Qaeda Revivalist movement, and what a phenomenal movement that is as well here in the UK. Dr. Brother leader, our audience is just joining us. They're just hopefully some of them coming over from the last show that we were doing. I don't know if you had time to catch any of that. I don't know how busy you always are.
No, I didn't, unfortunately. As much as I wanted to, I didn't get around to but I'm sure it went very well.
Well, it was, again, more learning, brother leader. We had a brother who was giving us really deep insight into the war that Chad's been fighting in that region. And, you know, all the Boko Harams and all the jihadist groups and all the different, and who's behind those different militia groups, and former president who was taken out, who he said we suspect was taken out by the Russians, you know. So wow. It was deeply insightful, and this is going to be another deeply insightful discussion and presentation that we're going to have from you as well, leader. So just thank you so much in advance. So leader, people are just coming in. I wonder if you'd like to just give us some opening remarks whilst we are being joined by our audience. Please.
Yeah, Tendai Mwari, Rumbidzo Kuna Mwari, Africa, to the God of Africa be the glory. I bring greetings as always in the most precious, powerful, and bountiful name of our motherland, Al Kebolan, Al Mama Africa, in the sacred spirits of our most gracious ancestors, and in a prayer for oneness, hope, and prosperity for all African people upon the face of Mother Earth. Africa, to the God of Africa be the glory. And from the Al-Qaeda Revivalist movement, of which I'm blessed to be its spiritual leader, I bring those greetings to the royal elders, queens, and kings, and the princesses and princes of great Mama Africa. And we are thankful unto Mwari Nyakosika, God the Creator, through Mudima Mokudo, our great ancestors, for this opportunity to minister to the most important people on the planet, the sons and daughters of Africa, and also to be doing so under the auspices of Sister Shanice's show and program. And, you know, we have nothing but commendation. We are in absolute awe of the tremendous work that you are doing in our community, our beloved Sister Shanice. The journalism is par excellence, and your love and commitment to our community and the work that you do is monumental, and we love and respect you for it. Tendai Mwari.
Tendai Mwari, thank you so much, leader. Thank you so much. It's what I've been put on the earth to do. I'm just led by the Spirit. And, you know, in the last show, we was talking about the extent to which we as a people have been indoctrinated with foreign religions, so much so that we were actually highlighting wars that we're waging against each other in the name of religion, Africans killing Africans, leader. And I just feel that, you know, as part of the opening of this show today, you know, to hear from, you know, you as a spiritual leader, as African spiritual leader, because, you know, I think we're all left feeling that we really need to try and reconnect with our African spirituality. But because, you know, the extent to which we've been indoctrinated with either Islam or Christianity, the vast majority of us, are just so far removed from our African spirituality. But I know that this is, where you, leader, a center in our community in maintaining, that and keeping alive our African spirituality. And I wonder if you could just open for us and share with us in a way that can reconnect us with our spirit mediums, which is where we need to go to find back our power. Brother leader, please give us, a spiritual anointing, if you can, that can help us to reconnect.
Yes, Tenai Mwari. Tenai Mwari. We say again, Rumbidzo Kunamwari, Africa, to the God of Africa, or we might say to the gods of Africa, be the glory. One of our great warrior scholars, liberation historians, now with the ancestors. His name is Baba Yusuf Ben Yochanan. He said, religion is the deification of a people's culture. Therefore, religion empowers the people in whose culture the religion is expressed. Religion is the deification of a people's culture. Therefore, religion empowers the people in whose culture the religion is expressed. And so what we understand from those words of wisdom is that the practice of religion in a culture elevates a people to a divine status, elevates the culture of the people to the status of divinity. And when you elevate the culture of the people to a status of divinity, you elevate the people to a status of divinity. So therefore, when another people embrace the religion of an alien culture, you are actually deifying the people of that culture. You are worshiping the people of that culture, and therefore empowering the people of that culture. So we as African people will find our greatest strength and our greatest power in our spirituality, which is the core and center of our, is the center and foundation of our African culture, the core of our African consciousness, and the essence of our African personality. So if we are not practicing our African spirituality, then we are out of kilter with our foundation as a people. We are all out of kilter with the core of our consciousness as a people. And therefore we are out of kilter with the essence of our personality, our true nature. It is grounded in our spirituality. See, culture, the other thing is that culture is the glue that binds a people together. And the most powerful agent in that glue, the binding agent in that glue, is the spirituality. It is in our spirituality that we discover our divinity. We see God essence in ourselves. This is what we have to understand. And we can't find that by wallowing in the cultural vessel of an alien people, especially if that culture defines us as heathens, as pagans, as all of these negative things that we experience within these alien cultures. So we as African people must return to the true essence of ourselves. We must see divinity in ourselves, and we must see ourselves in the divine. Therefore, when we call upon the creator of the universe, We must visualize an image of ourselves. That's the most empowering thing. You see, otherwise, what we are doing is binding ourselves to another people. Culture is the glue that binds the people together. But when you practice the culture of an alien people, you're binding yourself to the culture of that people. You are binding yourselves to the nature of that people. And you are alienating yourself from yourself. We are dislocating ourselves. So we have to return in the Alkebulan revivalist movement. When we do our rituals, when we have our shumira and we pour libation, one of our utterances, one of our mantra is return to the way. Return to the way. African people, return to the way. Reclaim your history. Return to the way. Reclaim your culture. Return to the way. Reclaim your God. Return to the way. Reclaim your land. Return to the way. Reclaim your ancestors. Return to the way. Reclaim your language. Return to the way. Reclaim your name. Return to the way. Reclaim your rituals. Return to the way. Reclaim your ceremonies. Return to the way. Reclaim your bits. Return to the way. Reclaim your prophecies. Return to the way. Reclaim your philosophies. Return to the way. Reclaim your vision. Return to the way. Reclaim your purpose. Return to the way. Reclaim your destiny. Return to the way. And it over and over again. Return to the way. Return to the way. Return to the way. Return to the way. Sons and daughters of Africa, return to the way. It's something profoundly and infinitely powerful about the nature of African being that everyone else in the world knows and fears, but the African, him or herself. And when we rediscover that true power, that true essence, there is no force on earth, force on earth that can stop the African from becoming the most awesome force in humanity. Nothing to stop us, nothing at all to stop us. But we must return to our way. We must stop deifying other people and other people's culture. We must stop worshiping other people and worship the true creator of the universe, whose essence is within us. We are the first people of the first. We are the first people of the first land. Africa, Mama Africa is, brothers and sisters, the cradle of civilization. In fact, it's the birthplace of humanity and the cradle of civilization. This is what we must remember, that Mama Africa is also the center of the world. We are in the center of the world. That Mama Africa is the richest continent on the face of the earth. Then why did the creator of the universe create Mama Africa as the center of the world and make her the richest continent on the face of the earth? And then out of the richness of her soil to create these melanated human beings out of black Mother Earth, create melanated human beings as the creme de la creme of humanity, the first of humanity, the first to stand up, to rise from our all fours and stand on our 2 feet and ask the questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how. That's the process of investigation of the very nature of being, the purpose of being. We first asked those questions and found the answers. and build civilizations out of what we have discovered, and then brought others among us. We explored the universe, and we inspired others to do the same, and we brought them among us, and we uplifted their humanity with our civilization. We gave the world civilization. We gave the world the consciousness of a creator, of a divine creator of the universe. No one taught Africans about God or about a divine creator and the destiny of the human soul. No one taught Africans about a concept called morality, human morality. We had all of that. Call it Ubuntu, call it Ma'at. We have all of that in Mama Africa. The Zulu say, Umuntu ugumuntu ugabantu. A person is a person because there are people. A person is a person because there are people. That's another way of saying I am because we are. And since we are, therefore I am. There is no me without you.
Yes.
I am because we are. Umuntu ugumuntu ugabantu. A person, every individual. The Sang people of Central Africa say, they say even simpler, zokwezo. Zokwezo. Every person is a human. Every person is a human. That means every individual is of value. Every individual in the community, in the society is of value. And therefore, the community, the nation is only as good as its lowest denominator. Therefore, we all have a vested interest in lifting all of us up. These are African concepts. These are concepts that are drawn from the wisdom of Muzumu Mokolo, our great ancestors. So we must return to our way. There is no practice of spirituality that does not involve the pouring of libation to our ancestors. When we understand that pouring of libation is the invocation of the spirit of Muzumu Mokolo, our great ancestors, and also memorializing their great works and deeds with the invocation of that spirit. Because Africans understood since time immemorial that we were not just physical beings, that we were physio-spiritual beings, that we were really spiritual beings having a physical experience in this dispensation of the cycle of life, the eternal cycle of life. And we go through this process for the purpose of, it's an important phase in the perfecting of our beings. We speak of Ma'at, truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, reciprocity, and order. Our ancestors gave us that concept of Ma'at, truth being the foundation of humanness, of human development, truth being the foundation of family development, community development, nation development. It must be founded and grounded in truth. And then justice and righteousness as the pillars. Justice being fair play, even-handedness, righteousness, right conduct, moral uprightness are the pillars. And we have to have that foundation in place and those pillars in place in order to have harmony, balance, reciprocity, and order. And what is the purpose of all of this? It is the pursuit of the perfection of being. We're striving to perfect our beings.
Wow.
Our sacred beings. You see, in the Christian religion, they tell us we're born in sin and shaped in iniquity. We're born in sin and shaped in iniquity. We have no such concept in African tradition. In African tradition, we are born sacred. We are born out of the divine essence of the supreme being. We are in essence sacred. So when we do wrong, when one does evil, one goes against one's true essence. Look at our names. Our names bear a statement of our divine essence. My first name is Mbandaka. Mbandaka, power of God. Power of the divine.
Yeah.
So, and in our tradition, we raise our children. We raise our children to honor their name. When you raise a child, you are nurturing them to fulfill the meaning of their names. And when that child goes wrong, that child goes outside of their name. When you discipline a child in African tradition, you're calling them back to their names. You ask them, what is your name? If they say, my name is Sikuru, God's gift. And then you remind them of what that means. God's gift. Bring joy to your home. You bring joy to your family. You bring joy to your community. And you show them where the sadness that they are bringing at the moment is going against their name. You're calling them back to their name. Our culture is so rich. It is awesome.
It is indeed, Brother Leader. You know, and we're at the when you was talking about, you know, our spirit, you know, and the spirit being the essence of who we are, and the spirit being the essence of our character, and how the spirit binds us as a people together, and how we can find our divinity within our spirit. As you was talking and sharing that with us, Leader, I was realizing that, you know, that's what we have been stripped of as a people. It's as if they've managed to take our spirit out of us, you know, as to the extent where we're connecting ourselves now, as you were saying, to someone else's spirit. And then what happens then is that we don't see the divinity within ourselves, as you were saying. You know, we were talking before about, you know, the extent of the indoctrination, and how, you know, through their schooling, if we go to a French school, we want to be more French than a French, and we aspire to talk like a Frenchman, walk like a Frenchman, and do everything that French people do. If we go to a British school, we aspire to be more British than the British, and, you know, we want to, you know, emulate the British, and so on. And, you know, we was talking about that level of indoctrination, and that is because, you know, as you've just, you know, showed us, because we've lost the essence of who we are as a people. It's as if we've got nothing to hold on to. You know, our culture has been eroded, our language, our names, everything that you talked of, that, you know, we should be holding on to so dearly. You know, you have just made us realize the cost, you know, the extent to which, you know, we are experiencing the cost of losing the essence of all of that. You know, how do we, you know, because there are millions of us who are holding on, for example, to the Arab religion, and so we're elevating them and, you know, wanting to emulate them. And then there are millions of us who are holding on to the Christian religion, the religion of conquerors, and, you know, and we were the ones who invented religion or spirituality in the first place and gave them their religion. And here we are now at a place as a conquered people where, you know, we've lost our way. How do we find our way back?
Tendai Mari, I'm inspired to quote, you know, the Al-Keblan revivalist movement is a proudly and profoundly Garveyite movement. And so there's a quote from the most eminent prophet and king is never far away from our lips. Papa Garvey says the world today is indebted to us for the benefits of civilization. They stole our arts and sciences from Africa. Then why should we be ashamed of ourselves? He says, let no voice but your own speak to you from the depths. Let no influence but your own rouse you in times of peace and in times of war. Therein lies, my beloved sister, the first phase of the answer to your question. How do we get back? How do we get back to where we were and where we should be and where we need to be?
Yes.
Let no voice but your own speak to you from the depths. Let no influence but your own rouse you in times of peace and in times of war. Presently, we are allowing voices from the imperialist wilderness, the European imperialist wilderness, from the Arabic imperialist wilderness to speak to us and to influence us. We need to close our ears now to these alien voices and open our ears to, you know, as Papa Bookman Dutty,
Yes.
at the beginning of the Haitian War
Yes,
for
let
liberation.
our people know. Some of our viewers may not know who Bookman Dutty is. Please just let our audience know, in case there are any there who don't know of Bookman Dutty and who he is. Please tell us who he was and who he remains to be in our history.
He was a spiritual leader, a Vodun or voodoo spiritual leader in Haiti during the Haitian Revolution, and he led a powerful ceremony to generate the warrior spirit for the revolution. He was also a war general as well. And he said in his prayer, in a powerful prayer which he delivered on the eve of the Haitian Revolution, throw away the image of the white man's God, which has so often brought us to tears, and listen to the God of liberty, which is the God of Africa, that speaks in all our hearts. He made it clear to us that we had to get rid of the image of the white man's God. And he says, which has often brought us to tears. And he says, listen to the God of liberty that speaks in all our hearts. What did Papa Garvey say? Let no voice but your own speak to you from the depths. Let no influence but your own rouse you in times of peace and in times of war. So we need to open our ears, open our hearts, open our minds, open our souls to the words of our ancestors that are coming through the voices of the inspired ones among us. And there are inspired ones among us. We must know what they sound like. We must know what they look like. They sound African, even if they're not speaking an African language. They speak this alien, unsanctified language like an African. So they make it sound like an African language almost. They speak to the wisdom of our ancestors. They evoke the spirit of our ancestors. We must open our hearts and our ears and our minds to the voices of those among us who are bringing these messages, because that's the essence of our liberation. And that's the beginning of the return. That is the beginning of extricating ourselves from the capture of our historical enslavers and colonizers. You see, the deepest form of enslavement and colonization is not the physical chains, but the spiritual chains, the mental chains, because those chains are invisible to the naked eye.
Yes.
Those chains are completely invisible to the naked eye. Insensible to the to our physical human senses, unless we ground ourselves again in our African spiritual tradition. We will not see those chains that are on our souls, and we will not see those chains that are on our minds.
That's right.
Papa Garvey says, hear all, but attend only to that which concerns you. Your allegiance shall be to your God, first to your God, to your race, to your family, to your country. These are the things that we have to return to, these principles. Yeah. These are the principles that we have to return to. Papa Garvey says, look to Africa. Let Africa be your guiding star, your star of destiny. Listen to the words, beloved brothers and sisters. Some of us are looking to Europe, France, Germany. Look how many of our people are jumping off in the Mediterranean Sea to their death, trying to run away from the motherland.
Wow.
To get to Italy and Greece and those places where they don't even like us. But Papa Garvey says, look to Africa. That's where our gaze should be, wherever we are in the world. That's where we need. That's the other thing that we need to do. We need to study. We need to study the works and the words of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey, because we ain't going to find it so powerful and so crystal clear anywhere else. Anywhere else. Nobody shook up the world and lifted the African world to the height that the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey, did in his time. And it will be to our credit and to our merit when we reclaim that work. He gave us the black print for our liberation. He gave us the black print. It's there. We don't talk about blueprint, we talk about black print, the template. He gave us that template. It's that template that the Osagifo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, tried to put in place in Ghana and began to put in place in Ghana. That is the example that we have to rejuvenate. Rejuvenate, and we all, brothers and sisters, all of us have to get on board. Think about it for a moment. Think about it. How were Africans during slavery? How were we brought from Africa to the miserable United States of America, to the Caribbean, to Europe? We were brought on ships. We were brought on ships. These floating dungeons, they call them slave ships. We call them floating dungeons because that's what they were. They were dungeons of death, dungeons of human torture and tyranny. And we were brought to think about it, that process. Think about it. Think about the suffering, the colossal suffering of our ancestors. on these God-forsaken floating dungeons. And Papa Garvey, Marcus Messiah Garvey, the prophet, the king, a man possessed with the spirit of African dignity, African sovereignty, African divinity. He was a man with a vision and a plan. He was obsessed with that vision. He had 4 hours sleep, 5 hours sleep if he was lucky per night, pursuing the course of African liberation. And he had the vision of starting a shipping company called the Black Star Line Steamship Corporation. What was the plan? That we would have our own ships and we would return as captains of our own ships, as navigators of our own ships back to Africa. We were going to reverse that process. We were not going to return with our backs on the base of the hulls of the ships in all kinds of body fluids. We were going to return on our feet as the navigators, as the captains of those ships.
Imagine.
We were going to return as people with a sovereign right to return to our motherland, because he had sent his delegates to the motherland, to Liberia, to negotiate this return. 150,000 families. Think about it. 150,000 families.
Wow.
Were signed up to this process.
Wow.
Think about it. Think about it. That's a powerful thing.
Yes. Yes,
That's
and that would have been an even greater number today as a percentage and a proportion of the population. So 150,000 back then, you know, may well translate into 500,000 today as a percentage of the population that were signed up to make that move. Wow, absolutely. That would have been a massive movement as a people. Imagine that's tremendous. I imagine that to be like the coming of the second Christ that they talk about in the African religion, in the European religion, you know. Wow.
This was the manifestation.
The trumpets would have been playing, the drums would have been beating. Imagine that return. I'm imagining it. 150,000, 500,000 Africans returning back to the motherland. Families Absolutely. As well. Families, not even individuals.
Families.
Yeah. So, families. And we had large families back then. So imagine that today. Wow, wow, wow.
We don't even begin to realize that the power that was in the chest of this man. Yeah. You know, the world had already seen the potentiality of Papa Garvey. 1920, the International Convention of, let's say, the African people of the world. It was then called the Negro people of the world. But let's say the International Convention of the African people of the world. First International Convention of the African people of the world. 1920, Madison Square Garden in the United States of America. 25,000 people packed Madison Square Gardens.
Wow.
And spilled out into the streets around Madison Square Gardens. Thousands more could not get in.
Wow.
But that wasn't the most remarkable thing that happened at that international convention. Even more remarkably, 100,000 people marched under the banner of the red, black, and green. You see behind me here, brothers and sisters, as is the portrait of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency. I'm sitting here under his gaze because he's the greatest inspiration, I have ever come across in liberation terms. 100,000 people. What measure of the spirit of a man who could inspire 100,000 people? The red, black, and green was new then. The red, black, and green was one of the developments of the 1920 International Convention. That was the national flag of the African people of the world. And 100,000 of us marched under that flag. We were ready. And some of us were actually in military uniform. Military uniforms, male and female, made by the organization itself. We were on the move. Wow. We were on the rise. So we have to study. We have to study the works in addition to studying our African spiritual cultural traditions. We have to study the works of the most eminent prophet and king fundamentally, fundamental to all other studies that we are going to do, because there are other things that we need to study. But fundamental to anything that we're going to study in the name of liberation, we must study the works and the character of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency, Marcus Messiah Garvey, because he, I say it again, gave us the blueprint for our liberation. Tendai Mwari.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did indeed. Tendai Mwari, Tendai Mwari. Let's rise up the name of Marcus Messiah Garvey. Yes, indeed. You know, and it's for us as a people to keep the names of our late greats alive. If we don't continue to call their name, if we don't continue to elevate them, if we don't, you know, remind our children of their greatness and what they accomplished, then they will die. They will only die when we stop calling on their name and when we stop remembering them. But what a man indeed. And as someone in the chat said, who was it? Abina. Abini says that that was the power of Garvey, and he was ahead of his time. He certainly was ahead of his time. In fact, you know, the works that he did back then is as relevant today, and his manual, you know, is as relevant to us today as it was back then. He certainly was ahead of his time. Or, you know, he was for our time. He came also to guide us during our time. And so one of his books, The Philosophies and Opinions of Marcus Messiah Garvey, kept alive by his wife, Amy Jacks Garvey, I think it was, you know, is a kind of manual for us as a people. And if we all read that, then, you know, to some extent ideologically, we would be on the same page as well. And I want to rise up as well, a beautiful sister who we have in the chat, our sister Nzinga Asata. Rise up, sister Nzinga Asata, who's also an author. And written a book called Women in the Garvey Movement. Yeah, because of course we have to remember the role of women in the Garvey movement. Sister Nzinga, please drop a note in the chat. Let us know how our people can get hold of a copy of that book there. And brother leader, you know Sister Nzinga Asata as well. You might want to just rise her up as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I give thanks for this opportunity to do so, because she is one of my favorite people, one of the people in our community, an elder in our community who I have the most profound, tremendous respect for because of her tireless commitment and hard work for our people over many, many years. And to know Queen Mother, because that's her title, Queen Mother Nzinga. To know Queen Mother Nzinga is to know someone who is very principled. She's principled, she is forthright, and she is a woman of her word. She says what she means, and she means what she says. Yeah, and she's a Garveyite. She can't go wrong for me. She's a Garveyite, and that, you know, you mentioned the book that she wrote. It is such an important. I've got it on my bookshelf, right there. Should I show the book, my sister? Should I?
Yes, do go ahead.
It'll take
Yes.
me 2 seconds. Yeah. So,
Yes,
brothers and sisters,
do. And yes, and Sister Nzinga, you know, please do let us know how we can get hold of a copy of your book. I'm going to have to get another one. I think I bought 2 in the past, and I've given both away as gifts, as I do. I'm going to get another one to keep for myself as well. There we have it. Women in the Garvey Movement. Written by our sister Nzinga Tata.
And this is just such an important contribution to the Garvey legacy, because the women of the Garvey movement were at least 60%. Some historians say as much as 2/3. Some say even 70%. But the majority of the membership were the women. And women, the women were at all levels of the movement. The women were in the leadership. The women were in the grassroots of the movement. But they provided at least 2/3 of the energy, 2/3 of what became the momentum of African liberation at that time. And so it's very, very important for us to learn the names and of the works and deeds of some of the key women in the Garvey movement, starting with Mama Amy Jacques Garvey, Papa Garvey's second wife, Amy Ashwood Garvey, and her contributions as the wife of Papa Garvey. But also, even after she and Papa Garvey were divorced, she continued to do great works around the African world. In fact, she was one of the organizers of one of the most important events and landmarks in African history, which was the 5th Pan-African Congress, which is the Congress. This was the event that gave the momentum to certain key people who went back to the African continent and started the anti-colonial movement, which became the independence movements of the 1950s and 60s. So that was a very, very important contribution, and Mama Amy Ashwood Garvey was key to that. A great woman called Henrietta Vinton Davis, Madame Demina, and there are many other names. Queen Mother Moore grew up in the Garvey movement. Mama Mariam Samad, who passed away a few years ago at the age of must be 97 or so, again, always spoke proudly about her experience of growing up as a child in the Garvey movement, and recounts those experiences with so much pride. I had the honor of meeting her through Sister Queen Mother Nzinga. I had the honor of meeting Mama Samad in Jamaica some 20 years ago when I was there. So, you know, these are great African queens that we should learn about, and this fantastic book will certainly move us in that direction. Tendai Mwari. So hail you, Queen Mother Nzinga. Hello.
Yes, how you up, Queen Nzinga, indeed. And here we have it, women in the Garvey movement: Amy Ashwood Garvey, Amy Jacques Garvey, Henrietta Vinton Davis. Yes, you mentioned them, didn't you? And more. Sister Nzinga, how can people get a hold of your book? Is there a website? Is there a link that you could put in the chat so that you know, people can get hold of a copy should they want to do so? Once you've posted it, we will put it up on the screen. Great works it is indeed. So people are commenting in the chat, leader, the great man himself, and they're saying Marcus Garvey is a prophet, and let's see what else we've got. They're saying that Marcus Garvey wouldn't fear today. He would get rid of the traitors publicly. He was loyal to his race. Yes, for him it was race first, wasn't it? Race first. I think, you know, even today that could be a unifying factor for us, you know, because we often focus on and talk about what divides us, but what unites us is our race. So until we get to the place, leader, where we're all on the same page again spiritually, you know, maybe it's the race first mantra that the great eminent King Marcus Messiah Garvey actually, you know, promoted during his time, is something that we need to be and ought to be returning to promoting again here. Because, you know, earlier we were recognizing that there was a war going on between the same tribe of people, and within this tribe, some were Muslims and some were Christians, and they were warring with each other, killing each other, taking each other's blood because, you know, of religion. But if we, as Marcus Garvey was saying in those days, recognize that, you know, what comes first is our race, before our religion, before our ethnic group, before our nationality, before anything else. First and foremost, we are, as we call ourselves today, Africans. Could that be, you know, the driving force, the glue that holds us together? Race first. What say you, brother leader Mbandaka?
Oh, Tendai Mari, I say yes, indubitably, without a doubt. You know, the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Messiah Garvey, never spoke an idle word. And he said, in a world of wolves, one should go armed. And one of the most powerful defensive weapons within reach of African people is the practice of race first in all parts of the world. He said, yes, put your race first, like all other races do. He says the cry is heard all over the world of Canada for the Canadians, China for the Chinese, Japan for the Japanese, America for the Americans, and he goes on. Do you think it is unreasonable that we, the Africans, we, the black people of the world, should raise the cry of Africa for the Africans? Another time he says, definitively, Africa for the Africans at home and abroad. Africa for the Africans at home and abroad. So he was clear about the race first concept. In the Alkebulan Revivalist movement, we say race awareness, we make an acronym out of race first. Race awareness and cultural emancipation. Race awareness and cultural emancipation spells, the first letters of those words spell race first before all other considerations. And if we look around the world today, quiet as it's kept, it is discernible that every people in the world are organized around principles of race first. Europeans have long since been advancing a philosophy of white supremacy. Indeed, it is global white supremacy that dominates the world today. The Chinese have ambitions to take over that position of dominance. Over 90% of Chinese see themselves as descendants of the Han civilization. The Chinese teach their people and their children in particular that they are the rightful leaders of the world. And they're striving to fulfill that position. They teach their children Sino supremacy or Chinese supremacy. They teach their children that they are the supreme race within the world. Don't you see how Chinese people walk the world? The ordinary Chinese person, they don't even see you. They don't even see you.
Yes.
So we as African people have to have a vision of African dominance in the world today. But for us to be able to accomplish that, we have to embrace our Africanness in its fullness. And then we have to embrace our African brothers and sisters in their fullness. And we have to build institutions that engineers that process. See, we have to understand, beloved brothers and sisters, Baba John Henry Clark tells us, people rise and fall within the context of institutions. People never rise any other way, they never fall for any other reason. He tells us, he demonstrates to us that the invader, the European invader and the Arab invader invaded our land, destroyed our institutions, and then laughed at our gods. And then he said the ultimate achievement, the invader made you laugh at your God. And when you laugh at your God, he says, you need no chains to hold you. You need no prison walls to contain you. Powerful words. The institution.
Yeah.
This is why in the Alkebulan revivalist movement, we have Shumira. Every first Umoja day of the month, first Sunday of the month, and note I said Umoja day, I didn't say Sunday, I'll come back to that in a moment. The first Umoja day of the month, we have Shumira, which is our African spiritual worship. Because if we are serious about reclaiming and rejuvenating our African spirituality, we have to institutionalize our African spirituality. So we have Shumira, which brings the African communal family together on the first Umoja day of the month to start the month officially grounded in our African spirituality and our African culture. We can't just talk about African spirituality. We have to practice it, we have to institutionalize it, and we have to live it. We have to have the expression, the organized expression of our African spirituality that our people can come and experience it. Our children can grow up in it and thus come to know what it is and understand what it is and how it applies in their lives. Otherwise, our spirituality becomes at best an academic subject that we revisit every now and again and have an intellectual taster. And then we put it down until we come back again to intellectualize about African spirituality. No, we have to institutionalize it so we can practice it together. And African spirituality is not something that we all go off individually and practice. There are the individual expressions, but the individual expressions are born out of the collective livity of our traditions. You see. So we have to implement our African spiritual traditions, and then everything else comes out of that. See, in our movement, we also have. Sorry, did you want to say something? You want to come in, sis?
I can absolutely agree with you, Leader Mbandaka, because therein lies our power. Therein lies
Absolutely.
the power that we lost. And agree, absolutely essential, absolutely critical that we as a people get back to practicing our African spirituality and gaining the power from it that we had when we were almighty, when we were the ones who were mighty, the almighty people. Yeah, agreeing with you, Leader. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, and you see, the practicing our spirituality is like exercising. Sorry, sis, you're breaking up.
Oh, no, saying please continue. Please continue.
Okay,
Sorry,
I was going to say.
Can please.
Okay, my sister, give thanks. I was going to say practicing our spirituality is like doing physical exercises. The more you do it, the stronger and fitter you get. The more we practice our African spirituality, the more empowered we become in the spirit. The more we grow spiritually. And we're talking about a collective growth. We're talking about individual and collective growth. The more we practice our African spirituality together, the more we enjoy the synergy of power that comes from the continuous sharing of that spiritual experience. And so that's part of what we have to restore. And that is why it is necessary for us to institutionalize collective African worship grounded in our African spiritual tradition. It is absolutely important. And then we also have emerging from that what we call life cycle blessings. Life cycle blessings. In every tradition, in every culture, there is a tradition for receiving newborns into the world. There is a tradition for bringing children into adulthood. There's a tradition for joining men and women, a man and a woman in conjugal union. There is a tradition for how you bury your dearly departed. In every culture, you have that. In our African culture, we have African-centered ways of bringing our children into the world and blessing them, marking their birth and blessing them with African names. We call that the naming ceremony. In the Kebble and Revivalist movement, we perform naming ceremonies. And then we have rites of passage programs. The rites of passage program for nurturing our young people. Every culture has its traditional ways of nurturing its young people, educating its young people, culturalizing its young people, socializing its young people, and bringing them into adulthood. Bringing them into adulthood as manifest men and women of the culture. See, the Jews have their bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah. Bar mitzvah for males, bat mitzvah for females. The Sikhs have their Khalsa training for the young Sikhs. We as Africans, we have our rites of passage program where we nurture our young people through the stages of childhood, adolescence, into adulthood. So becoming a man and a woman, the discovery of manhood and womanhood is not an accident. It is the result of nurturing. It is the result of nourishing their minds, their bodies, and their souls. It is a result of instilling them with pride in their African selves. That's a powerful thing to do, and we must reclaim that responsibility. We have to assume that responsibility again. And then there is the union, this powerful thing. This tremendously powerful thing we call marriage. The joining together of man and woman in divine conjugal union is so profoundly important in African tradition. In our movement, in the Alkebulan Revivalist movement, after the Rites of Passage program, bringing our sons and daughters into manhood and womanhood, adulthood, and imparting to them knowledge, inspiration, self-love, an African-centered worldview. We produce men and women who are conscious of themselves as an African, conscious of and proudly engaged in fulfilling their responsibility to their race. So we initiate them. We initiate them into manhood. We initiate them into womanhood. And then we confer upon them the responsibility that comes with manhood and womanhood. And then there's a requirement and expectation that with the guidance of their elders, they will be divinely joined in conjugal union. If it's a male, if it's a young man, it's a young man with a young woman. A young woman with a young man. That's the only conjugal union we know as African people. That's the only conjugal. I want to make that absolutely clear. That's the only conjugal union we know as an African people. And these are very important cultural institutions. In fact, we call these, you know, we in our tradition, we understand a concept called natural imperatives. Natural imperatives are compelling events in the life cycle which are determined by the laws of nature. So birth, conception and birth is controlled by the laws of nature. Growth and maturation is controlled by the laws of nature. The coming to the union, the sexual union of male and female is determined by the laws of nature. Growing into old age is determined by the laws of nature. Death, what we call death or passing, the transition to the realm of the ancestors is determined by the laws of nature. But then our ancestors create cultural traditions to harmonize with the laws of nature. And so for every key stage in the life cycle, for every cultural imperative, for every, natural imperative, there is a cultural imperative. So for the birth of a child, you have the naming ceremony. For growth and maturation, you have the rites of passage program, which entails education, it entails socialization, it entails culturalization, etc. For the union of male and female, the divine conjugal union of male and female, we have marriage. And for eldership, we have also initiation into eldership, rites of passage, training and initiation into eldership. And then ultimately, for passing over, we have a special ceremony a special passing over ceremony to formally mark the soul of the departed ascending into the realm of the ancestors, and to empower that soul in its ascendancy. All of these institutions we need to bring back in place. Instead of when our babies are born, we run up to some church and hand them our babies to christen them. Then we take our children back to the church to be baptized, or some other thing that we send them to mark they're coming into manhood or womanhood. And then we go back to church, or I guess if we're Muslims, we're going to the Muslim mosque for them to marry us. And then when we die, we run back to the church or to the mosque for them to do the final rites. We will never be free. We will never be free. We have our own traditions. And I don't say that to disrespect. My mother is a Christian. Is a Christianized African. My sister, my aunts, they're all church-going Christians, and they're all big up in the church as well. They don't just go to church. You know, my mother's an elder in the church, deaconess, big up in the church. My auntie, the same thing. My sister, the same thing. I love them, but I don't love them any less. So I don't love you any less, brother or sister, if you're a Christian listening in. Sorry, sis? Go ahead, sis.
So we all have them in our family. I was there at one time, my brother. You know, it's
you're kind of breaking up, so I'm not hearing you. I'm not hearing you fully.
It's what we were indoctrinated with as children. It's what, you know, was instilled into us from the day we came out of our mother's womb. And so for many of us, our families, us there. I hope you're hearing me and that I'm not.
I'm hearing you better now, sis. I'm hearing you better.
Brother Lee. Oh, good. Oh, good. So I was saying that it's what a lot of us were actually, as children, you know, we had indoctrinated into us as well. And some of us, when we got older and we came to our senses and the realization, you know, of what this was all about, you know, we left it behind. But in so doing, left many of our brothers and sisters, left many of our mothers and fathers and uncles and aunties. Some of us, even our children, you know, are still very much, you know, following the white man's religion. And leader, I'll show you a list because, you know,
you're breaking up. You're breaking up now.
So important, because if we could get on this road back to our, you know, back to who we are as a people, then. Okay, sorry about that. I was saying, if we could get across the road as to who we are as a people, you know, it would go a long way into stopping the wars that we are fighting amongst ourselves. And, you know, when I think about the topic for discussion today as well, I hope you're hearing me. I just want to share,
I'm hearing you. I'm hearing
you know, to get your thoughts and opinions on this list as well, my brother. And, you know, this is the reality of what's happening on the continent today. So we have a situation where, and this list was put together for me, and this list has, and it's grown since then, but the time this was done a couple of strongs ago, there were 170 high-ranking African officials, presidents, vice presidents, ex-presidents, former prime ministers, you know, you know, opposition leaders, people who were maybe anti-Big C-19, you know, prominent journalists, you know, key individuals in a number of African countries who all died of them, supposedly, to COVID, and a few due to a heart attack. And we all know that President Magufuli death was claimed to be, as a result of a heart attack. And even a few days ago, my brother, we've lost another one of our leading medical professionals who spoke out against the big 19, if we call it, might, trigger the ribbons and this will get cut off, but you know what I'm talking about. Our brother Dr. Stephen Karanja, who was very outspoken against C19. His video went viral. Now he has passed on to the ancestors as well. And of course, we've had the kings and queens of our recent of the Zulu nation, the king, the queen, and their heir to the throne. They all need to be added to this list as well. Leader, what in your opinion is going on? We know 30 years after assassinations, when the CIA and the FBI and others allow for their intelligence information to become public, we know what happened to many of our past leaders. But what is going on today, in your opinion, brother leader? Do you have any thoughts on this very extensive and very concerning list that I'm sharing with the family?
Tenai Mari. Well, Tenai Mari, I share your concerns and your skepticism about what seems to be unfolding on the African continent, being attributed to COVID-19. We have to be, when a people are in a state of oppression, they live in the shadow of death. That is a reality. When an oppressor has comprehensively dominated the life of a people, then they exercise the power of life and death over that people. And as long as we allow, and I have to say, because we have to take responsibility as a people, as long as we allow ourselves to continue to exist in conditions of oppression, so long we will continue to live in the shadow of death, and we will continue to empower those who oppress us to determine whether we live or die. We will continue to subject ourselves to high-tech methods of control, high-tech methods of destruction. And we must understand that we're living in a time of highly sophisticated means of controlling people and highly sophisticated means, technological means of destroying human life. And it just clearly just seems too coincidental that all of these deaths of leading people in African nations, officials in African nations, all of these deaths taking place at this time, and so many of those who speak out against COVID-19, who expose the folly of COVID-19, end up dead. We have to question it. We have to question it. And this has been going on for a very long time. We have talked about, and we will continue to talk about, the situation across the African continent historically. where African leaders who demonstrate a progressiveness, African leaders who demonstrate scruple, African leaders who honor their, who respect and honor the position of leadership given to them by their people to serve their people. Oh, I'm so sorry, my sister. I need to get. I'm so sorry, my sister. I need to get. Need to plug in my laptop.
Yes, go ahead. No problem. No problem, leader. Go ahead and plug your laptop in. We don't want to lose you. In the meantime, family, let me just read out for you, you know, the Zimbabwean officials that have passed away within the last year. Yeah, within the last year. So we have Anenas Chingwendere, who was the ex-education minister. Bikizilia Maduna Fuzuweo, prominent Rwanda human rights and Burundi activist. We have Biggie Joel Matiza, who was the transport minister. We have Zimbabwean Christopher Chigumba, who was the ex-ZANU-PF MP. We had the Zimbabwean Douglas Naikararamba, former Zimbabwe National Army of the ZNA Chief of Staff, and he was the retired Lieutenant General. We lost Ellen Guadarazimba, who was the Minister of State for the Maninkaland Provincial Affairs. These are all COVID, supposedly COVID. Remember, this part of the world hardly has any COVID, yeah? We lost Esafa Dongongwa, who was the Movement for the Democratic Change founding member and former Pumula Lviv Member of Parliament. Zimbabwe lost Kogo Nguni ni Chitimeri. They also lost Gita Hakim, who was the prominent and foremost heart specialist and physician. Janiton Joseph Mashika, National Railways and Zimbabwe acting general manager. Zimbabwe lost Joseph Maundi, former senator and chief Morozova of Bikitia. Apologies, 100 apologies for all of the mispronunciations, by the way. Overson Mugwizi, National Army spokesperson and colonel. They lost Paradisai Zimondi, who was the retired Major General and former Zimbabwe Prisons and Correctional Services Commissioner General. They lost Params Shiri, Minister of Lands, Agriculture and Rural Resettlement. Sibusisio Moya, who was the Foreign Affairs Minister. Tom Bloomfield, who was the founder and director of the Teenage Arts Center in Gurevu. Webster Tembu, who was the former Kariba town clerk and Makundi district administrator. Zororo Makawamba, Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation journalist and son of prominent businessman James Makamba, all supposedly died of COVID. That is just one African country. And as I said, there are over 170 deaths now. Look at little Tanzania as well, you know. Brother Leader, hopefully you're connected and back with us. You know, yes, to be honest, if I was, you know, a leading official in an African country right now, you know, I wouldn't be taking any drinks, any food from anybody. I would be, you know, making sure that it's only my personal chefs who are with me for 20 years who are doing my cooking. I mean, it's enough to get paranoid, in my opinion. I mean, this is a part of the world where there's hardly any COVID whatsoever. Yet here in the UK, or you're there in America, you know, where in France, other parts of Europe and Canada, where COVID, you know, is pandemic, we're not seeing the same numbers of senior high-ranking officials that are strong said, you know, these are people who can get the best medical treatment that the world has in the African continent. Let me go back to leader Mbandaka to get, you know, some more views on this.
Tendai Mwari. You see,
Leader, are you there? Are you back with us?
Yes, my sister, can you hear me?
Tendai Mwari.
Tendai Mwari, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you, but I think there's a delay.
Oh. How do we proceed, sis?
Yes, please continue, my brother. Please do continue.
Yes.
I'm hearing you loud and clear. We're all hearing you loud and clear.
Tendai Mwari, you know, we as a people, as a continent, we are presently, it has to be said that presently we are just too vulnerable. We have allowed our oppressors to run amok across the African continent. They are embedded on the African continent. Their armies are embedded right across the African continent. You have French armies in so-called Francophone African nations, at least 14, 15 African nations and others. But these 14 African nations are where they have their biggest armies. You have the Americans with their AFRICOM in 35 African nations across the continent. You have British armies across several African nations. At least 10 African nations have significant presence of British armies. Papa Garvey and the Osage for Kwame Nkrumah warned us that we should never allow the colonizers or the former colonizers to have their armies on our continent. They have their armies on our continent. And a lot of what has been developed as weapons of mass destruction, whether it's biological weapons, chemical weapons, weapons of all descriptions, are developed by armies. They are developed by armies with the scientists working with the armies to develop these highly sophisticated weapons of warfare. And so we are too exposed as a people. That is where we find ourselves presently. We need to do what the Chinese did during their revolution. We really haven't had a revolution on the African continent yet. We had the potential for a revolution. We had revolutionaries emerging in the 50s and the 60s, in the 70s and the 80s. But they all, almost to the last man, and they were predominantly, if not exclusively, men, were taken out. They were taken out and they were replaced with puppets. They were replaced with agents of imperialism to carry out the bidding of the neo-colonial so-called masters. And that is the scenario that we are battling with, we are grappling with on the African continent today. We have to break that cycle. We have to do what the Chinese did. We have to expel those who represent a threat to us. We have to expel our historical oppressors and colonizers from the African continent, and we have to close Africa's borders like the Chinese did. We have to become insular on the African continent if we are really going to stop this wave of death, if we are really, brothers and sisters, going to protect ourselves from the exposure that we presently have to our historical oppressors to determine whether we live or die, because that's what's going on here. They have the power, and they do exercise the power to determine who lives and who dies. And who they determine will live are those who are of value to their interest. Who they take out are those who are a threat to their interest. We cannot just take it for granted that this is just coincidental. We have to apply the wisdom of Ivan van Sertima and ask, when do the incidents of coincidence become conclusive? The incidents of coincidence are too repetitive, are too regular for us as a people not to draw an intelligent conclusion. Something is not right. Something is not right on the African continent. The extent to which state officials are dying allegedly from COVID-19 should raise serious questions about what's really going on behind the propaganda. The evidence suggests that the power elites of the world, the power elites of the globe in which we live, are the ones who are pushing this pandemic. It is in their interest, it seems, that the world should be panicked at this moment. And we hear about the global reset that is now taking place, which is real. All of this lockdown, mask wearing, social distancing, closing schools, closing all the major institutions of society, having people fearing each other. I'm walking on the street and I see a man walking past two women, and he actually spins around, and so that when he goes past these women, his back is kind of turned to them. You have neighbors shopping on the neighbors because they have visitors in their home. My little grandson, he's really my brother's grandson, but he calls me granddad and calls my brother grandpappy. So my little grandson, his mother, my niece, my brother's daughter, had a birthday party, 8 years old. The neighbors called police. Broad daylight, few children having fun, enjoying at the birthday party of an 8-year-old, and it was family. Few members of family come around to enjoy, and there were police, 3 police cars, police van outside the house. You would think it was some big drug racket going on inside there, right? Neighbors call police. That is a society and the world that we're living in presently, and it's getting worse. The draconian measures are mounting, and once history shows us that once draconian measures are implemented, they are never taken back unless the people rise up and turn the society over. The forces of global oppression will not take back these draconian measures that they have implemented, because they have implemented it for a reason. And the reason is control. The reason is control. And they are using this to exercise control. It's called the Hegelian dialectic. The Hegelian dialectic, where a problem is deliberately created so that panic is instilled in the people, mass panic, and so the people now turn to the government for the solution. The people are frightened, are fearful, are terrified. They turn to the government for the solution, and then the government comes up with the solution. But that was the plan in the first place. See, so we as a people, these are very, very desperate times for us as a people. We've got to get our heads together. We've got to get our heads together, beloved brothers and sisters, and we have to build those institutions that will enable us to protect ourselves en masse. We're not there right now. So these deaths on the African continent, yes, we should be concerned. Yes, we should interrogate them. The death of Pombe Magufuli, the timing of it, even after he himself put it out there in the public that he was waging war on these external forces. He put it out there, and he alluded to those who came before him who did the same thing and what happened to them. So it was like a premonition of what was going to happen to him. He was telling us what was going to happen to him. He dies, and we're told he died from a heart attack. We are not worth our salt. We're not worth his sacrifice if we just accept that. So that's what I would say for now on that, my sister. We cannot just take it for granted that what they say is the cause of death is indeed the cause of death. And we cannot just take it for granted that these state officials are all dying so rapidly at this moment in time. We can't. Tendai Mwari.
Tendai Mwari, thank you so much, Leader Mbandaka, for sharing your thoughts on that list. It is, you know, as I think Ivor Van Sertinen said, at what point does, you know, coincidence become an incident, you know? And I think we've definitely reached that point here. And people were adding more names to the list as well in the chat, including our sister Arikana Chimbori's son as well. It said should be added to this list, and the Zulu family as well, royal family that was recently taken out as well. And, you know, it's so concerning. It looks to me as if COVID is being used as a cloak and a cover to disguise, you know, assassinations that's taking place on the continent. And, you know, this is something that we're putting down to COVID, but, you know, when you overlap the fact that there's this heightened increase in military activity that's taking place on the continent as well, you know, more militia group activities, more wars that are starting, you know, it was in 2019, I think it was, when there were a number of summits, you know, Africa, Russia summit, Africa, Chinese summit, Africa, US summit, all these summits. And I noticed that there were all these deals being signed at these summit agreements. And we did get a peek into what they were signing and what they were buying. It was really arms. And I'm wondering, you know, what's going on here? Are we preparing, is the world preparing Africa for a new wave of civil wars and cold wars like we had back in the, you know, 60s and 70s? And it seems that, you know, certain people are being moved out of the way, permanently moved out of the way, and maybe new lackeys are being put in their place. But it's deeply concerning indeed. And until we get to the place, as our brother Rasul would say, where, you know, we as Africans, you know, stop killing each other and stop fighting against each other, is the day that Africa will rise. We've got to get to that place very, very quickly indeed. Okay, we are about 20 minutes away from the top of the hour. And let me just go over to the chat and see some of the comments, questions, views of people in the chat, Brother Leader, and then we'll get right back to you. So JJ saying, but today our sons and daughters are encouraged to date outside of their race. Ah, yes, indeed. And this is done by TV ads, TV shows, the magazines, etc., etc. Again, you know, part of a strategy to dilute our race and to undermine us as Africans. Obiaman has just posted and said, Africa is being prepared for a Berlin Conference 2.0. Sister Nzinga says, JJ, tell them that you will disown them if they take up with people outside our race. So Sister Nzinga is saying that we've got to be firm with children. We've got to tell them that we will disown them. And isn't that what other races tell their children? You know, other races recognize and appreciate love, I believe, you know, the importance of race purity, the importance of, you know, building your race and keeping, you know, your wealth and everything inside of your race. But we as a race, you know, I think we don't value the importance of race first, race purity, and building our race. Dr. Abu says in Ubuntu, as Dr. Abu says, we are the most horrible horror movie of all time. We are in the most horrible horror movie of all time, and Africans are definitely not in the starring roles. Vudum, Ubuntu, yes, indeed. We are, you know, the pawns, the people who are dying first in this horror movie. Yes, indeed. Nzinga says, very true, leader, brother leader, we have to stand up and not allow our rights to be taken away from us. Mr. Wilfred Ambrosian says, I think he was assassinated. Members clone leaders have no choice but to play their masked game. Brother leader, do the leaders of today have a choice? Or do you feel, as Brother Member is saying, that these clone leaders today have no choice but to do the bidding of their former colonial masters? How do we get ourselves out of this mess that we find ourselves in? Any suggestions from you, please, Leader Mbandaka, and any suggestions from our audience? How do we get ourselves out of this mess we find ourselves in? We have to dig our way out of it.
Tenamwari. Before I answer that, I saw a message from Brother Obiaman, I think it was, that said that we also have to close the Sahara from another set of oppressors. He didn't say the Arabs, but I'm sure it's the Arabs that he's referring to. And I totally concur with that sentiment. I just wanted to add to that. You know, just by referring to that part of Africa as the Maghreb or the Sahel, we need to understand when we use those terms, these are Arab words. And these are Arab words that lay claim to that part of the African continent. Maghreb means west in Arabic. So when we talk about the Arab Maghreb, when we talk about the Maghreb, it implies Arab Maghreb. And sometimes people actually say the Arab Maghreb. And it actually means the Arab West. And Sahel means coast. So we're actually saying or implying the Arab coast. So even linguistically, we have to correct our linguistic cultural references. We have to correct that. Even something like the Indian Ocean. How is there an Indian Ocean and there isn't an African Ocean when there is more Africa in the ocean than India? Who is defining the terms? See my point? Something as simple as that. No, that is the African Ocean. I feel we ocean that. That is the African Ocean, and we must call it the African Ocean. One the piece of India is in the ocean. India is 1.6 million square miles. Africa is 13 million square miles. You may recall the last time I was on your show, my sister, I broke down that we can fit China, the richest countries and regions in the world, the USA, China, India, Europe, and we still would have room for Japan. All of these can fit into the African continent, and we still have wiggle room.
That's right.
And yet none of them altogether don't have 1/10 of the natural wealth of the African continent. And yet these are the richest countries and the richest regions in the world. And Africans are the poorest people, or not the poorest people actually, the most impoverished. It's the condition of poverty that is imposed upon Africa and African people. So we need to get it right. No, and there's no easy answer to this. You ask the question, my sister, do our leaders have a choice? Yes, they do have a choice. There is always a choice. There's always a choice between integrity and shamelessness. There's always a choice. But there's another layer of reality that we have to contend with when we talk about African leaders, especially on the African continent. That too often the choice of integrity is also implicitly the choice of death.
Yeah.
Too many of our African leaders who choose integrity, who choose to do right, who choose to be progressive, who choose scruples sign their death warrant by standing upon principle. Africa has got to be able to protect its leadership. Africa has got to be able to protect its leadership. Too many African leaders have been taken out because they seek to do right by their people. And then agents, sellout agents, are put in their place. On the African continent today, we have a history of sellout agents, gatekeepers of European imperialism, there to protect the interests of their neo-colonial slave masters against the interests of the people. That's the political system that we have on the African continent. Even this multi-party politics that we play on the African continent. You look at most of our best leaders, when they come into power, they call for a one-party system. I am totally in support of the one-party system. This so-called multi-party system, this so-called democracy, is a code word. It's a code word for infiltration. Because the so-called democratic system that has elections every 5 years is to enable the European imperialists, Euro-American imperialists, to infiltrate the political system and to buy out one political party or the other political party and to put the party that serves their interests in power. That's what's happening on the African continent. Most, if not all, of the governments on the African continent are owned and controlled by foreign governments. That is not a condition that is conducive to the empowerment and the liberation of our people. So the political paradigm has to change. And that's not going to be easy. Africa needs a revolution. Without a doubt, Africa needs a revolution. The starting point would have to be that we the people have to organize ourselves as the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Messiah Garvey taught us we should do. Organize ourselves. Organize provisional governments wherever we are. This is what the UNIA-ACL did in 1920. They established a provisional government for the African people of the world, with the aim to establish units of that provisional government in every nation where there are African people. We have got to start to organize ourselves as a nation, even on the African continent. Organize ourselves as a nation of people. Organize provisional governments where we are now taking charge of our sovereign rights. We are now taking charge of our own lives. And we're establishing provisional economies, provisional systems of education, provisional healthcare systems. We have got to start thinking along those lines. And all of these systems are grounded in our African spiritual cultural traditions. And so if we are serious about our liberation, wherever we are as African people, we need to start to organize ourselves around those principles. If we can organize provisional governments with our provisional economies, our provisional healthcare systems, science and technological systems, our provisional educational systems, our provisional security and defense systems. In other words, our provisional armies. If we can do all of that, then we will have the nucleus of a revolution. Because ain't no revolution gonna happen unless we are organized on all levels. And right now, where we are as African people in the world, we are completely disorganized. This is why Papa Garvey says the greatest weapon used against the African is the weapon of disorganization. We are thoroughly disorganized. And that's not an accident, it's by design. It has been designed. It has been so designed that African people cannot organize ourselves around an agenda that is going to unite us, is going to empower us for our liberation. So those of us who call ourselves conscious have to move forward with that agenda. Because that is the black print that the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey, laid down for us. That is the black print. That is the black print. Tendai Mwari.
Tendai Mwari, thank you so much, Leader Mbandaka. We are 4 minutes away from the top of the hour. We've got so many comments in the chat. I've been posting some of them. Not sure if you get the chance to read them as you're talking at the same time, Brother Leader. So just going to pull out one or two. This one saying, you know, something that we often talk about, the fact that Africa doesn't make any arms, yet there are armed conflicts everywhere in Africa. And there was a bit of a conversation going on about our people marrying outside of our race. And that when this happens in other communities, their families tend to disown them, but we don't. We embrace them. So maybe that's something we need to stop embracing, so that, you know, we can start working towards sorting ourselves out as a people. And let's see what comments we've got here. African Last says that America is already building. Is already on the African continent building drones bases. And there was talking about if a Chinese rocket re-entered the atmosphere uncontrolled and disintegrated somewhere in the Ivory Coast. Wow, that's a Cold War on our grounds. And the potential for a Cold War on our grounds is very much there at the moment. I mean, you've got the US Army bases, the French Army bases, the Chinese are there, the Indians are there, the Turkish are there. You know, they've all got their army bases on our continent. These are very worrying and troubling times indeed. And we need to learn from our history, you know, what the future could look like if the level of escalation, military escalation that's happened isn't actually abated, isn't actually, if we don't put a stop to it. I'm already hearing in response to some of the conflicts and so militia group activities that's happening in various countries across Africa, that the US Army are proposing that they come in to help sort the problems out. Europe are proposing that they send their armies in to help Africa to resolve the problems. We saw what happened when the US went into Haiti and when they've gone into other countries, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran. We don't need that on the continent of Africa. So
not least because, not least because, my sister, the wars that we see and the conflicts that we see on the African continent are proxy wars, proxy conflicts. They are created by external forces. The same forces that claim that they're there to keep peace are the same forces that are fomenting the wars on the. there's no civil conflict or civil war going on the African, not one. They are all proxy wars manipulated by these vicious, fiendish external forces. Yeah, and it's all over the African continent. All over the African continent. You have it in we know about the Congo. That war that's been going on in the Congo, millions of people have died. We have it in the Central African Republic, which is next to the Congo. We have the Selekas and the anti-Mbandaka forces, which are Christianized and Islamized forces. But that's not the totality of why the conflict is going on. You know, we have in Chad, which I know you've spoken about today, my sister, and the way the French have been using Chad to foment wars in different parts of that region of Africa. Yeah, and calling it peacekeeping. Yeah, we have it's all over the African continent. We have in Cameroons. We have a situation in the Cameroons with the Ambazonia conflict in the Cameroons, where you have anglicized Africans who are fighting the government for the right to establish their own nation. That's a colonial legacy. That is a colonial legacy. They want an Anglophone nation as opposed to a Francophone nation. That's a colonial legacy. And it just goes on and on. There are border wars. Fortunately, fortunately, Eritrea and Ethiopia have now signed a peace treaty, which seems to be holding well so far. But that war went on for 30 years over border. You know, and it just goes on and on right across the African continent. Mozambique, in the north of Mozambique, is a nasty war going on there. While the French are investing 20 billion or 30 billion, whatever it is, in natural gas and oil, and in Mozambique, oil and natural gas, right? And this so-called war is not interrupting French interests. Yeah, if anything, it's facilitating French interests. So there's not one war that's happening on the African continent that is a genuine civil war. These are all proxy wars, right? Because the minds of Africans and the souls of Africans are so messed up that we allow external forces to manipulate us to that extent. There's a lot of bloodshed taking place on our beloved mother continent. It has to be said. Oceans of African blood, precious African blood. Oceans of African blood is being shed on the African continent. How can we stop that bloodshed? How can we stop that bloodshed? The present political situation on the African continent, as long as that political paradigm remains in place, then there will be wars all over Africa. There will be corruption all over Africa, because it is designed to facilitate that. It is designed to keep the African continent unstable. Because when people are unstable, people can't grow. People are preoccupied with survival. People are preoccupied with dodging bullets. You can't think creatively. You can't think productively. You can't organize productively. When millions of people are being displaced from one part of the African continent to the next part of the African continent, walking miles and miles. What time do you have to think about building a civilization? Millions of African people languishing in poverty. Brother mentioned that we don't make guns. We don't make guns on the African continent, but there's more than enough guns to sustain wars.
Yeah.
Right? What Africa has naturally is fertile land to grow food. What Africa has naturally are a range of the world's most coveted natural resources, and yet we're lacking in food, we're lacking in housing, we're lacking in energy, we're lacking in running water. We were irrigating our water, we were creating water systems and irrigating our land thousands of years ago. And now we have a problem with running water on the African continent.
Yeah, yeah, totally destroyed.
These paradoxes,
You know,
these ironies.
Leader Mbandaka. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but you know, change is happening, change is coming. They said change is already here, we just haven't seen it yet. Something along those lines. So here it is, that we have already won the war. We just can't see it. Rome is crumbling. And I think on that note, because we are over our 2 hours already, Brother Leader, as always, an absolute privilege and honor. And another very deeply interesting and insightfully educational discussion with you as well. We thank you so much, Leader. Let me allow you to have the last word, and also let me thank everyone in the audience that stayed with us throughout the night as well. Thank you all so much for your contributions via the chat as well. We thank you. Brother Leader, let me ask you to leave us with a spiritual anointing, you know, that's going to help to elevate us as a people and to act as a magnet for others, you know, to want to be part of, you know, the new Africa, the new vision for Africa that we all so desperately, you know, want to see. And all being well, we'll see you next strong, Leader Mbandaka. All being well, I think strong the final session. Hopefully you will be able to make a session as well. And our audience, please join us again, same time next strong as well. Leader, please leave us with an African spiritual type of way of departing.
Okay. Tendai Mari, notwithstanding my cries of woe, beloved brothers and sisters, I want to just draw you back to the words I said earlier on, which is that we are a powerful people. And when we rediscover our divinity, which is the real source of our power, when we as a people rejuvenate our own culture, when we organize ourselves and build our institutions grounded in our own culture, there will not be a force on the planet that can stop us. That's how powerful we are. That's how awesome we are. I'm going to close with a words work of mine, a poem. I call them words work, in honor of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey. It goes like this. Look to Africa. Look to Africa. Look to Africa. Heed the words of the most eminent of one. O you of beautiful ebony hue. Look to Africa was his cry, and lift your minds, your spirit high, high, high. 'Tis the land of the Genesis, which many will claim, the land of glory, of hope, and of fame. 'Tis the birthplace of your minds, bodies, and souls, the source from which your truths will unfold, and your liberation aim will find its goal. Rise up, you mighty race. Rise up and face responsibilities of what it must take to set your land, your people free. For cries of woe just will not go, lest we stand firm and strike a deadly blow against the foe whose pernicious seed within us continues to grow and grow and grow. Word sounds of the said eminent one asks, where are their women and men who will hold on until victory is won and beyond, till Africa and all Africans are free to live in justice, love, and unity, when we shall rise like a roaring shumba and chant lazima tutashinda bila shaka, lazima tutashinda bila shaka, lazima tutashinda bila shaka. All power to our people. Rise, brothers and sisters, in the words of the most eminent prophet and king. Unite, organize now or perish. Rise, you mighty people, for you can accomplish whatever you will. Rumbidzo kunamwari ye Africa. To the God of Africa be the glory. Tendai Mwari.
Tendai Mwari, Leader Mbandaka, as always, absolutely awesome. We learned so much from you. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your knowledge, to share your wisdom, to share the wealth of information that you have. Everybody in the chat, thank you so much. All being well, please do join us same time next strong. More love, more power, peace and love. Voodoo. We're out of here.
Voodoo.
One love, family. Voodoo.